Welcome to my video. This is my second full year of growing grains at home for food. And it's actually easier than you think if you've watched my rye and my wheat video from last year. And if you don't already know, you can go online and order the seeds you need. And in my climate, I get like winter wheat, winter rye. Like I plant in the fall and harvest in the spring and summer. So anyway, in this video, I'm going to take you through my process, my experience, and hopefully this will clarify a lot of questions that you may be thinking in the back of your mind. So, this year, this year's process, or this year's grains I planted this year's harvest I planted last October, and this right here is last early October. I actually used the previous year's rye straw to plant my rye. This is my rye here and here. I put some einkorn wheat over there and over there. And there, and a little bit of barley right here. Now that over there, I actually just put like grass, I ran a tiller through this, and I just used whatever grass I could rake up, and just used that to cover the seed over. But with the rye, I actually had some rye straw, so I just laid the rye straw down to cover the seed up. And you plant it just like you would grass seed. Only in my case, I till it up, remove all the weeds and grass, so the only thing you have growing is your grain that you want. So anyway, plant that, and hopefully, I know in my climate it rained not long after I planted this, and about 2 to 3 weeks later, here's the rye, and over here, you can see it growing through the straw. Here's the einkorn wheat. And this rye is cereal rye, if anyone's wondering. And this is actually a month after October. This is late November. And you have, this is the einkorn wheat, that's the einkorn wheat. There's the rye. And we're going into winter time when I took this picture, and it's already up to that height. So anyway, that is this year's harvest time. So this is a picture of the rye at harvest time. This is in July of the following year. So I planted it in October. It goes through winter time, and we actually had quite a cold outbreak where I live at in Ohio, USA. And December 2022, we had quite a cold outbreak. It got down to, in my area, -2 for several days. And the rye, the wheat, the barley, it done just fine, no problems. So anyway, this is the rye at harvest time. You can see the seed heads. And I got a wheelbarrow to collect the seed heads. I actually tried something different this year. Well, I started doing it last year, but this year I completely went this route. To harvest it, I took scissors and cut off the seed heads. Instead of cutting down the whole stalk with the seed head on it. This right here is the einkorn wheat. This is a little patch I left so I can take a nice little picture of it. After I got done with the picture, I did cut the seed heads off. And there's a picture of, I got the rye cut down. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to show some videos. This is the rye. As you can see, I have a wheelbarrow. I collect the seed heads. I cut them off. I collect the seed heads. Why? Because the first time I tried to just cut the whole stalk down and then thresh it like that, I ended up getting dirt mixed in with my grain, because sometimes the dirt likes to, well, I'll demonstrate that later in the video, but it's a lot harder to do it that way. I found this way to be easier, so I'm cutting off the seed heads, putting them in the wheelbarrow. I've done the same thing with the einkorn wheat and the cereal rye. And then I come back through with a sickle and cut it down. And I have a pile of straw. Or I will have a pile of straw. So I turned that into a two-step process. Come back again. Okay. Almost done with the cereal rye. There's the little patch of einkorn wheat I left. Now the cereal rye, the seed heads are big enough that you could actually do them one at a time, but with the einkorn wheat, I found that it's easier to simply try to grab 2 or 3 at once and just cut them like that, because they're smaller and there's so many of them. So, okay. And I done the same thing to the einkorn wheat. As you can see. I made straw out of it. And there's the part with, as I mentioned, you get dirt about where I first with the hard red winter wheat that I grew the previous year. I ended up getting dirt in it when I was threshing it. There's why. Because whenever if you don't have a sharp sickle, sometimes it tends to want to pull the whole roots and everything up whenever you try to cut it. And then if you try to thresh that whole without taking the seed heads off of it, then it can lead to getting some dirt mixed in there. And so that's something you might want to avoid, doing it that way. So it's best to probably, I think, for me, it's best to cut the seed heads off first, then cut the stalks down. And before I show the harvest video, one thing I do want to point out is I did try on one of the two sections of the einkorn wheat that I tried. I put fertilizer on part of it, and the other part had no fertilizer at all. And that was a mistake. I ended up not getting much of a yield from it because all of the stalks fell over, and well, first of all, they turned really dark green. The tips started looked like they were getting burnt, and which is a sign of nitrogenization. So the stalks fell over. I had more or less, it looked like just a big mat of wheat laying over. So compare that to the unfertilized section, no comparison. The unfertilized section was way better. So definitely no need to use fertilizer on grains at all. At least not with the ancient grains like einkorn wheat. At least that's been my experience. Modern wheat may be more tolerant of it, but not the ancient varieties. So here's the threshing. What I done, instead of using my pillowcase like I done last time, because I wore the pillowcase out, I took an old bed sheet, and this is probably the best way to, I found actually the quickest, the most efficient way, even more efficient than the pillowcase. Lay the bed sheet out like this. Grab a handful of seed heads, and this is the rye right here that I'm doing. And then fold it back over. Take your feet and rub it like that, and you're actually dislodging the grain from the seed heads. Some of it might want to come out to the side. That's alright. Just put it back in and continue. Now there's a bunch of seed heads and a bunch of grain laying there. Now this is the tedious part. Fold it up and be very careful. Do not spill it, or you will have a mess and a lot of wasted grain. Take it over, put it in a bucket. Be very careful not to spill it. Throw out the seed heads that are there. Some of them might have some grain in them still, but that's okay. You can't get 100%. but you'll still get enough to make it worthwhile. And when you're done with the threshing part, it comes time to winnow the grain. And this is probably the easiest part of all of it. If you have a steady breeze or a fan, you simply stand there and pour one bucket into the other and let the breeze blow away all of the chaff and debris, and basically you'll end up with nice pure grain. Now some of the seed heads may want to stay with the grain, fall into the bucket with the grain instead of blowing away, in which case just reach in and pick them out. And then go back to pouring again. This is the easiest part of all, I think. So that is winnowing. And keep in mind it's the same process for wheat and rye. There's really no big difference. And let's see. So let me take a moment to mention one issue you'll have with ancient grains. I know this is one reason why I haven't talked about the wheat too much yet. There's my poor pillowcase. It served its use. Some grain fell out of the rye seed heads before I even threshed them. This is what I get after threshing the einkorn wheat the same way as I threshed the rye. Notice it still has the hulls on it. You have hullless versus hulled. And the issue is you got to get, there's an extra step with the hulled varieties. You have to get the hull off of the grain. With the cereal rye and the modern wheat, which I grew last year, with them, the grain simply falls right out. But with the einkorn wheat, it doesn't, and other ancient grains. So there's an extra step where you have to get that out of there. And this right here is the modern wheat from last year. You'll notice there is the wheat berry in the middle. And it was really, really hard to actually get that wheat berry out and keep the hull around it, because it breaks free so easily. But now there's an einkorn seed head. There's both of them. Now what you'll notice with the einkorn, when the seed head, when you thresh it, the spikelets basically break off intact, and you'll get something similar to this. I tried to peel back the hull a little bit. There's one of the wheat berries. There's a second wheat berry. And with that issue, it adds an extra step, and because I haven't figured out an efficient way of doing it yet, I'm not including that step on this video. But just be aware that modern wheat, which is like hard red winter wheat, which is what I grew last year, and other modern wheat varieties, cereal rye, that stuff, you do not have to worry about hulls. Just thresh it, the berries break loose, and you're fine. But with the ancient varieties, you have hulls on it. Now, I also grew some barley, and it's even worse than the einkorn wheat is as far as getting the hull off of the grain. So, anyway, after all of this, I end up with some rye. I put a little desiccant pack in there, a little gel desiccant pack, and obviously do not eat, as it says on it. I probably don't have to mention that. It should be obvious, but anyway, that should keep the moisture down and make sure you don't have any issues. Now, something else that I've wondered, and I really can't find an answer to this, is will these grains naturally cross with one another to form hybrids? I do not know. I have tried to find that answer, and I know you can cross rye and wheat purposely and make to where with wheat is its botanical name is triticum, and its Latin botanical name is triticum, and rye it's secale. And I know you can cross them and create something called tricale, and you can actually buy that. It's a hybrid, but will it do it naturally? I do not know. Or does it have to have human intervention to make it happen? I really don't know. But anyway, and it's the same with modern wheat and einkorn wheat. Will that cross? Einkorn wheat is a diploid, and modern wheat is a hexaploid. So the modern wheat is more genetically complex than the einkorn wheat. So will they cross? I don't know that answer. It's hard to find that answer. So anyway, I recommend, this is not as hard as you think, obviously, and there's really no work to this other than harvest time and threshing and winnowing. So you plant the seed and it sprouts. You don't have to touch it, at least not in my experience, until, well, let's see, I plant in October. I don't have to touch it until June or July. And then you have that small window there at harvest time where if you plant a lot of this, it will be a lot of work. But I would suggest start small, maybe even the size of a rug. Just take like something the size of a bathroom rug or a rug you have in front of your television. Even a little patch that size would do just fine to start out with. That will probably produce enough to make you to basically cook you a pan of wheat berries or rye berries. So that way you can say, I grew it myself and I ate what I grew, and if I don't have modern civilization, if I don't have heavy agricultural machinery, I can grow it and I can feed myself. And plus it's fun to deal with. So as you can tell, it's the same process for all grains. The big difference is hulled versus hullless. For beginners, I would not recommend dealing with hulled versions. For beginners, get some modern wheat, get some cereal rye. Avoid hulled varieties if you're a beginner. That's my recommendation. So eventually, once I figure out an efficient method to actually do the dehulling process, then I will make a video on that. At least I probably will make a video on that. So um, anyway. Anyway, I hope this covers the gist of what I'm trying to get across, and thanks for watching.